Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Politicians say that, but no, they can't. And no, they can't's a nasty title for my new book, but it's true. Free people left alone do everything better than clumsy government. I mean, let me ask you, I'll give you $100 if you can name anything the government does more efficiently than the private sector. Well, spend money. If the private sector could benefit by wasting money, they would do that better. War, someone said, that may be a job we want only government to do, but there's no evidence that our military is more efficient than the private contractors who wage war. And I don't necessarily think we want private armies, but they're not. Government isn't more efficient. Anyway, television just put out a new video about one more thing the government doesn't do well.
Washington wants to control more and more of our lives, but they can't even fix their own escalators. Almost 250,000 people showed up for the Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert rally back in 2010. Heading home, some demonstrators experienced a different sort of horror show when the brakes stopped working on this escalator, which landed 4 passengers in the hospital. These days, 1 out of 8 escalators is out of service at all times.
Really irritating, especially when you're wearing heels in the morning and rushing to work.
This is horrible.
I've seen people that were supposed to be working on an escalator sleeping on the job.
And people want more government. We're joined now by Kennedy, former MTV VJ, who was the reporter on that video, and Nick Gillespie, who runs Reason TV. So, what
did we learn? Yeah. It's horrible. If you want to see private escalators working well, go to a mall. Yeah. If you want to see government-run escalators working poorly, don't go to D.C. because you'll probably land in the hospital.
D.C. is a city of museums, and its greatest museum is the Museum of Broken Escalators. You can't get away from it, and they're talking about taking 8.5 months to replace over 500 escalators. You talk to anybody there, figuring 8.5 months is a lowball estimate. It's going to be much longer than that.
So you've looked at this for a while. Why do these things happen in government?
Well, in the D.C. escalator case in the early 90s, they shifted away from having contracted the work out through competitive bidding and whatnot.
Yeah, they had private contracts.
And they took it inside, they took it into the public sector, thinking that would be more efficient, cut out a middleman, and it would be cheaper and better.
It's not cheaper, though, because they end up paying their mechanics much more. They're not sufficiently trained, and there are too many of them. There are 4 escalators or elevators per 1 mechanic. I mean, it's a ridiculous ratio. And they say from within the ranks that didn't speak to us on camera, 10% of the workforce does 100% of the labor, and the 90% are just slacking off. Whereas in the private sector, 25% are doing all the work, while 75% are slacking.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't say the private sector is perfect, but it's just better.
Well, and one of the reasons it's better is because if you screw up, there's some consequences to it. I mean, what happens with the D.C. escalators, it's the same thing that happens with public schools or other types of programs. If you screw up, you end up getting more money, or you get more aid, or you get another chance and another chance and another chance. And, in the end, because the money's not coming out of your pocket, you slide a lot longer.
And there's no competition. When there's no for-profit, and when there isn't a marketplace, then you really don't have that incentive to do better.
And you tried to confront the D.C. officials about that, and?
They were mum.
So there are other examples of this. Road building.
Road building is a kind of socialized, centralized mess. And right now, every city, every state, the federal government is out of money. There's a ton of private capital that can be brought in to build more road capacity, which would free up congestion. It's all an opt-in system.
Let's slow this down, because this frightens people. I mean, private roads sounds like what? You can't use my road.
No, what it means is if there is heavy congestion, you'll pay more to use the faster lanes, whereas the socially engineered HOV lanes, they don't work. They slow everybody down, and they're empty. It's really ridiculous, but you look at the 91 freeway in Southern California, and you'll pay anywhere from $1.50 to $9.
If you want to go fast.
It's go faster, and for people who have jobs where they make actual money, it's nice to get there on time.
Well, and this is the whole point, is that it isn't even exclusive. It adds to your options. So, those moments when you need to go fast, you'll pay extra to get there. I mean, it's just-in-time pricing. And if you're not in a rush, then you can sit in congestion. And the more people that pay, that also means people on the free road then, get a quicker ride as well. So it's really, I hate to use terms like win-win, but, why would it be wrong to have a private company build extra capacity that's going to help both people who use the toll roads and people who don't? It just seems like a no-brainer.
Let's use words like win-win. That's what the private, it's what capitalism does.
Taxpayer money not used to build the freeway that we're talking about.
And in Paris, there's a tunnel, and people move much more quickly because it was privatized. Now, Kennedy, you're from the music business where most people believe government can. So how did you come to understand that, no, they can't?
Well, it's really interesting because for a lot of libertarians, we knew we were libertarians before we heard the word or knew what it meant. And I actually had the great privilege of having discussions with Frank Zappa. And when I say discussions, I would listen to him because I was terrified to open my mouth. Then he would expose me for being a total fraud. And when I would listen to his stations about censorship, I was moved and deeply inspired. And, this was an area that I was familiar with. And I was getting a lot of heat from conservative groups for being a fan of Nine Inch Nails because they had some dirty lyrics. But, as a responsible adult, I was still able to maintain my straight edge and enjoy some good music.
And Nick, in the Reason video, I was struck by this one person holding up a sign. This was at this Jon Stewart that followed the Glenn Beck rally, which said, "Government is awesome."
One hopes that was an ironic gesture. Sadly,
I don't think
it
so.
Wasn't. Yeah. No, and this is, there's a role and there's a place for government, and it's to kind of create a stable structure by which people can get on with their lives. It helps maybe to, give a little bit of roads, courts, some law enforcement, things like that. And when it gets much beyond that, it really starts getting in the way of people coming together and coming up with new ideas and new ways of doing things and coming together voluntarily to make a much more interesting and choice-driven world.
Thank you, Kennedy. Nick Gillespie, Reason TV. Coming up, how I went from being dumb to not so dumb. How I went from thinking government can to writing a book called No, They Can't. More shameless self-promotion when we return.